The rain came down in thin silver blades, cutting through the heavy Louisiana air as Elise drove along the narrow, winding road that led into Terrebonne Parish. Her windshield wipers struggled to keep up, smearing water across glass already filmed with swamp dust. The radio, long since swallowed by static, whispered low frequencies that seemed almost human, breaths between thunderclaps. She shut it off. The silence was worse. She hadn't planned on returning here, not to this place. Not to her. Caroline Ellis. The woman whose story had become legend in paranormal circles. The hospice nurse who disappeared 20 years ago inside a decaying plantation mansion on the outskirts of New Orleans, where whispers of hoodoo and soul transference had stained the air long before she arrived. The case had been dismissed, filed away as unexplained disappearance. But Elise had read the old police reports, the newspaper clippings, and the late-night message boards. Caroline's name was always mentioned with the same mix of fear and fascination. The Devereaux Plantation. The house that ate people whole. When Elise saw the property was finally listed for demolition, something inside her had stirred. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe obsession. But she couldn't shake the feeling that some stories refused to stay buried. The gate appeared through the mist like a skeleton's grin, rusted iron twisted into elaborate symbols she didn't recognize. Spanish moss drooped from the branches like curtains of gray hair. The gravel road beyond was half swallowed by weeds. She parked the car and stepped out into the thick air. The sound of cicadas died instantly. Silence rolled in like a fog. The house stood beyond the trees, its white paint blistered and peeled, its black shutters hanging by single rusted nails. The porch sagged inward, and the front door hung slightly ajar, moving gently with each breath of wind. It looked less like a home and more like something alive, waiting. Elise lifted her flashlight. "I shouldn't be here," she whispered, though she was already walking toward it. Inside, the smell hit her, damp wood, rot, old perfume. Her boots left faint impressions in a layer of dust so thick it looked like ash. The air felt wet, like the house was sweating. She could hear the faint drip of rain through cracks in the roof. Each drop echoed too long, as if the walls were repeating the sound. The foyer was lined with portraits, all the Devereaux family, their painted eyes cloudy and yellowed with age. One woman's face, half peeled away from moisture, revealed another portrait beneath, the faint outline of a man with hollow eyes and an open mouth. Elise stepped closer, her breath clouding in the sudden chill. That's when she heard it, a faint click behind her. The front door. She turned just as it eased shut. It didn't slam. It clicked. A deliberate, careful sound. Her flashlight flickered. "Elise," she muttered to herself, "you're just tired. Old. Houses breathe. Wood shifts." But the air didn't feel like breath. It felt like watching. She set down her recorder and pressed play. Initial entry, Devereaux Estate. 11:03 p.m. The house has remained untouched for nearly 2 decades. Locals claim the last known occupant, Caroline Ellis, disappeared here after involvement with a hoodoo ritual. The door. A whisper interrupted her, faint, almost beneath hearing. She froze. It came from upstairs. Door was never closed. The voice was female. Broken. Wet. Elise looked up toward the stairwell. The beam of her flashlight landed on the railing, deep gouges carved into the wood. 5 parallel marks, like something had been dragged up or down by force. Her stomach twisted. She climbed one step, then another. The boards groaned beneath her, but the whispering grew louder. "Don't open it, not again." Her light brushed across the landing, where a single brass key hung from a frayed cord nailed into the wall. The shape was familiar, a skeleton key, tarnished black with age. A tag dangled from it, written in faded ink. For the attic door. Elise reached for it, fingers trembling. The metal was cold, too cold. The moment she touched it, the air in the house seemed to stop, as though the building itself were holding its breath. Then came a sound, deep and guttural, from somewhere above. A door unlatching. Her flashlight sputtered. Elise, the voice moaned again, right beside her ear this time, a whisper not carried by air, but inside her head. She spun around, her breath catching. No one was there. Only the empty hallway stretching into shadow. But on the wall behind her, where the portraits had been, something new was painted, dripping, fresh red strokes forming words that hadn't been there minutes before. She never left. Her flashlight went out. And in that absolute darkness, Elise felt the floorboards shift, something moving beneath them, slow and deliberate, like bones turning in the soil. The door hadn't just closed 20 years ago. It had been waiting to open again. The house didn't sleep. Elise could feel that as she stood frozen in the dark foyer, the kind of dark that pressed against her eyes like wet cloth. Her flashlight, useless now, gave one final flicker before dying completely. The sound from beneath the floorboards stopped, replaced by something worse, the sound of breathing. Slow. Deep. Not hers. Elise, she whispered to herself again, the word a plea, a grounding tool. But even her voice felt foreign, too small against the vast emptiness around her. She found her way to the wall and clicked her lighter, a small flame trembling in the still air. It barely illuminated the corridor ahead, where shadows crawled like living veins. The words still dripped on the wall, she never left. The message gleamed wet in the dim light. Elise reached out, her fingers came away sticky. Not paint. Blood. Her heart hammered. She stumbled back, bumping into a dusty side table. A porcelain doll fell from it, smashing on the floor. The sound echoed far too loud, as if it traveled through every room in the mansion. For a moment, she thought she heard faint laughter answer back. She steadied herself. You wanted proof, she muttered shakily into her recorder. You've got it now. Active manifestation, possible auditory hallucinations, or residual haunting. But she didn't believe it was residual. This house knew her now. It had learned her name. She climbed the stairs again, the lighter's flame barely pushing back the dark. Her breath came out white. At the top, the air smelled different, sweet, sickly, like rotting magnolias. The hall stretched longer than it should have, the angles subtly wrong. Doors lined both sides, all closed except one. That door was open just enough to see the shimmer of glass inside. The mirror room. Elise pushed it open, and her flame brightened against dozens, maybe hundreds, of mirrors covering every wall. Some were cracked, some whole, but all reflected her from impossible angles. The floorboards creaked beneath her, yet the reflections didn't move quite the same. In one mirror, she blinked, her reflection didn't. Her throat tightened. A faint, feminine hum floated through the air, a lullaby, old and southern, sung through cracked lips. Elise turned toward the sound. One of the mirrors rippled like water. Behind the reflection, she saw a room, not this one, but one filled with candlelight and ritual markings. A woman in white stood there, her eyes wide and wrong. Caroline. Elise whispered. The woman's face twitched, recognition, or imitation. The humming stopped. Her lips began to move, but the voice didn't come from the mirror. It came from behind Elise. She opened the wrong door. Elise spun, flame flaring. Nothing. Just her reflection, dozens of them, all staring back. But then, one reflection smiled. She wasn't smiling. The figure in the mirror slowly tilted its head, blood running from its nose like ink. The sound of whispering filled the air again, a dozen voices overlapping, chanting in broken French Creole. Elise's knees weakened. She dropped her recorder, the red light still blinking. The flame sputtered. The reflections began to shift, each showing something slightly different, people who weren't there. Caroline's pale face. The old Devereux couple, their eyes black pits. Children hanging upside down, swinging gently like pendulums. "Stop it," Elise hissed. "Stop." The lighter went out. Instantly, something cold gripped her wrist. A voice breathed against her ear, close enough for her skin to feel the shape of the words. "Do you believe in souls, Elise?" Her scream caught in her throat. She tore free and stumbled backward, hitting one of the mirrors. The glass didn't shatter, it gave, like skin. Her hand sank in up to her wrist. She pulled back, gasping, and the mirror rippled again. This time, she saw herself, standing perfectly still, but her reflection's eyes were black. The reflection smiled wider, then raised its hand and placed a single finger to its lips. Shoo! Every mirror in the room shattered at once. The sound was deafening, a wave of breaking glass, each shard humming with a low vibration that felt like it came from inside her chest. The floor shook. Dust rained from the ceiling. Elise hit the ground, covering her head. When she looked up again, the walls were bare, no mirrors, no reflections. Only a door that hadn't been there before. It was small, made of dark wood, with carvings of roots twisting into skulls. The brass plate above it was engraved with one word. Attic. Elise's shaking hand reached into her pocket. The skeleton key was already there. She didn't remember putting it there. Her voice, barely a whisper, trembled into the recorder still blinking red on the floor. "Something doesn't want me to leave." Then she heard it again, faintly, somewhere above. A woman humming that same lullaby. The sound came from behind the attic door. The sound of that lullaby crawled down the walls like smoke, soft, trembling, heartbreakingly human, and yet, wrong. Too slow, too steady. Elise stood before the attic door, staring at the grotesque carvings of skulls entangled in roots. Each face seemed to twist subtly when she wasn't looking directly at it, as though the wood itself were breathing. Her hand trembled around the skeleton key. It was heavier now, slick with moisture that hadn't been there before. She wiped it on her sleeve, but the wetness returned immediately, like the key itself was sweating. She could turn back. She should turn back. But the house had a way of making retreat impossible. Behind her, the hall stretched longer than before, shadows thick as tar, swallowing the staircase that led back down. There was no more rain outside. No more sound except that low, lilting hum seeping through the cracks of the door. She leaned close, whispering into her recorder. "Time," her voice quivered. "Time is unclear. I can't tell how long I've been here. There's distortion. The house is shifting. I hear," her voice. As she raised the key toward the lock, something moved on the door, faint, like veins pulsing beneath flesh. The brass keyhole widened, metal stretching, inhaling. Her breath caught as the key slid in too easily, as if the door had been waiting for it. When the lock clicked open, the lullaby stopped. Elise froze. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was thick, like the house was holding its breath again. She pushed. The door creaked open, the sound like bone splitting. A gust of air escaped, carrying the heavy scent of mildew and candle wax. Inside, everything was dark except for a single light flickering from above. A lantern hung from the rafters, swaying slightly though there was no wind. Elise climbed the narrow steps, her every movement echoing far too loudly. Dust motes floated through the air like ash. The attic was enormous, filled with relics, furniture draped in sheets, broken trunks, and old family portraits. She walked slowly, her lighter shaking in her grip. On the far wall, she saw a circle of symbols drawn in what looked like dried blood. Bones, small ones, animal maybe, or not, were arranged around it, forming a ritual pattern. Candles had long since melted into black puddles. In the center lay a rocking chair. And in the rocking chair sat a figure. At first, Elise thought it was a mannequin, its skin parchment pale, its head tilted down. But then, it rocked once. Slowly. Elise. The voice wasn't from the recorder this time. It came directly from the figure. Her stomach clenched. "Who are you?" The head lifted, revealing a face that was both young and ancient. The features were familiar, hauntingly so. She'd seen them in the old photos from the Devereaux archives. Caroline Ellis. But Caroline's eyes were wrong, not black, not white, but empty. As if whatever she once was had been scooped out and replaced with shadow. "You came back," Caroline whispered, her voice breaking like dry leaves. "It never ends when you take the key. It starts over. Always." Elise took a step closer despite every nerve screaming to run. "You're alive." Caroline smiled faintly, blood trickling from the corners of her mouth. "Alive. Dead. Borrowed. Does it matter?" "They don't let go." Her gaze dropped to Elise's hand, to the skeleton key gleaming faintly in the lantern light. "You unlocked it again." The word sent a cold spike through Elise's spine. "Unlocked what?" Caroline's head turned sharply toward the far corner of the attic, toward an old full-length mirror covered with a sheet. The fabric rippled slightly, though no air moved. "The door behind the door," Caroline said, voice trembling. "They live there. They use this world like a mask. You opened it." Elise's throat tightened. "You're saying something came through?" Caroline nodded slowly. "It's already here." The mirror's cloth fell away on its own. The reflection inside didn't show the attic, it showed a dim hallway stretching endlessly, lined with flickering candles. At the end stood something tall and impossibly thin, watching. Elise stepped back. The attic seemed to breathe again. The air grew thicker, pressing against her skin. Caroline began to convulse, her body twisting unnaturally. Her bones cracked, her mouth opening wide in a silent scream as black smoke poured from her throat. "Elise," she gasped, eyes rolling back. "Don't let it take your name." The lantern went out. Darkness swallowed everything. Elise stumbled backward, choking on the smell of burnt flesh and rot. Her lighter clicked uselessly. The mirror glowed faintly now, the figure within it closer, clearer. Its face was human but wrong, eyes too wide, mouth stretched into a grin that moved even as the rest of the face didn't. "Elise," it said in Caroline's voice, "you opened the wrong door." The mirror shattered, and from the splinters, something reached out. Elise screamed as cold fingers brushed her cheek. She turned, running blindly toward the attic stairs. The door slammed behind her, rattling the house to its foundation. The lullaby began again. This time, it came from inside her head. Elise burst down the stairs, her chest heaving, eyes wide and burning. The air in the house had changed, it pulsed now, thick and wet, as if the mansion itself had begun to breathe. Her footsteps echoed unnaturally long in the darkness. No matter how far she ran, the sound of that lullaby followed her, soft, sweet, endlessly looping. She stopped in the middle of the second-floor hallway, gasping. The floor beneath her feet vibrated faintly, like a heartbeat deep within the wood. The temperature dropped so suddenly that frost bloomed across the wallpaper in a spiderweb pattern. Elise tried to steady her voice as she spoke into the recorder. "Attic, contact with apparition resembling Caroline Ellis. Possible possession state." "I don't." The recorder clicked off by itself. A sharp noise followed, tap tap tap, coming from one of the closed rooms at the end of the corridor. 3 taps. A pause. Then 3 more. Perfect rhythm. She hesitated. Her instincts screamed at her to leave, to run until the swamp swallowed her, but something, curiosity, or perhaps the same pull that had brought Caroline back here 20 years ago, made her move forward. As she approached, the tapping stopped. The door ahead of her was covered in strange markings burned into the wood, looping sigils and symbols she recognized from old hoodoo texts. Words of protection. Or imprisonment. Her trembling fingers wrapped around the brass knob. The metal was so cold it burned. She pushed the door open. The smell hit first: copper, incense, rot. The room inside was round, the walls lined with black candles, their flames trembling as if gasping for air. In the center, a circle of salt surrounded an iron chair. Chains hung loosely from the arms and legs. Dried blood had darkened the floorboards beneath. Her stomach lurched. It was a ritual room, a possession chamber. There were papers scattered on a table nearby, each stained with age. Elise lifted one with shaking hands. The handwriting was elegant but erratic, jagged where the pen had dug into the paper. They said the spirit can be trapped in flesh again. That the right words, the right key, can make her return. She turned the page. Caroline didn't die. She was taken. They used her body, wore her soul like a coat. The final page was smeared with something dark and oily, the words barely legible. The key opens more than doors. It opens the self. Elise backed away, heart pounding. Something whispered from the shadows, the faint sound of movement behind her, soft and slow, like someone dragging bare feet across wood. Elise. The voice again. Caroline's voice. But it was wrong this time, fractured, distorted, layered with something else underneath. She spun around. A figure stood in the corner of the room. At first, it looked like a shadow, but as her eyes adjusted, she saw a woman's outline, thin, trembling, her hands twitching like puppet strings pulled too tight. Her head was tilted back at an unnatural angle, eyes black and gleaming like glass. "Caroline." Elise whispered. The woman smiled, a broken, lopsided grin. "You shouldn't have come back." The chains on the iron chair rattled. The door slammed shut. Elise lunged toward it, but her body locked in place. She couldn't move. Her arms stiffened, her breath froze mid-inhale. Something invisible pressed against her skin, fingers without form, pressing from inside. The woman stepped closer. Her bare feet left black prints on the floorboards. Her voice, though still shaped like Caroline's, was layered with something ancient. "Every door is a body," it whispered. "Every key, a soul." The candles flickered violently. The air shimmered. Elise's reflection appeared in the iron of the chair, except it wasn't her. It was her body, but with those same black eyes, smiling faintly. A searing pain shot through her chest. She dropped to her knees, gasping. Images flashed in her mind, the plantation decades ago, the rituals, the chanting. The Devereaux family bound in a circle, transferring life from one vessel to another. Caroline screaming as the light left her eyes and entered someone else's body. Now Elise understood. The curse wasn't tied to the house. It was tied to the key. Whoever turned it didn't just unlock a door, they unlocked themselves to something else. A whisper filled her ears, hundreds of voices, speaking as one. We needed a new door. The circle of salt broke as something heavy moved inside it. The iron chair creaked. The chains began to rise on their own, slithering like snakes through the air. Elise, Caroline's face said, though it wasn't really her. It's your turn. The chains lashed out, wrapping around Elise's wrists and ankles. She screamed, thrashing, but the more she fought, the colder the air became. Her breath crystallized midair. The lights dimmed until only the faintest glow from the candles remained. Then, silence. The recorder on the floor clicked on again by itself. A new voice spoke softly into it, Elise's voice, but drained, hollow. Experiment concluded. New vessel accepted. The recorder clicked off. The candles went out. And when the darkness lifted, the chair was no longer empty. Elise sat perfectly still, her eyes black as pitch, smiling faintly, as if something behind her skin was testing how to use a face. Outside, the swamp began to stir. The house sighed contentedly. And upstairs, the attic door unlocked itself again. The morning light never came. When Elise opened her eyes, it was as if the house itself had swallowed the sun. The windows were gray and trembling, their glass clouded with condensation from within. Her mind felt heavy, stuffed with fog. For a moment she didn't know where she was, the iron chair, the circle, the whispers, had it been a nightmare? But the marks on her wrists said otherwise. Thin red lines, like bracelets, ringed her skin. Not deep, but perfect. Deliberate. She sat up slowly, every muscle stiff with dread. The candle wax had hardened in strange spirals around the room, like something had been breathing on it while it melted. The air carried the scent of smoke and metal. Her recorder lay on the floor near the door. The red light was blinking again. She reached for it with shaking fingers and pressed play. A voice filled the silence. Her own. Entry 5. Time unknown. The house is aware. I can feel it listening. She froze. She didn't remember recording that. It's not ghosts, the voice continued. It's memory. The house remembers its people, their footsteps, their words, their fears. It repeats them. It learns from them. The playback ended with the faint sound of breathing that wasn't hers. Elise looked around, heart pounding. She needed air. She stumbled out of the possession room and down the hall, her boots crunching on broken plaster. The floor dipped slightly, as though the entire mansion were slowly sinking into the swamp. Every step felt heavier. The wallpaper curled like burnt paper, revealing old symbols drawn underneath, prayers, protective marks, names carved by trembling hands. She followed the faint outline of daylight leaking from a doorway at the end of the corridor. It was the sunroom. Or what was left of it. The glass ceiling was cracked in a spiderweb pattern, letting in a dim, reddish glow. Elise realized it wasn't sunlight, it was the color of the sky outside. The world had turned the hue of rust. A blood moon. Her stomach tightened. Somewhere deep in her memory, from one of the journals she'd read about the Devereaux estate, a line surfaced. When the blood moon rises, the house remembers its name. Elise took a breath and steadied herself. The air hummed faintly, a low vibration that she could feel in her teeth. In the corner of the room, an old gramophone stood covered in dust. Its brass horn pointed toward the cracked ceiling like a mouth gasping for air. Against her better judgment, she turned the crank. The record began to spin, releasing a soft, crackling sound, then music. A slow waltz, warped and dragging, like something half-forgotten. Beneath it, faint voices murmured, too soft to make out, but rhythmic, as though reciting something. Elise stepped closer, trying to catch the words. The whispering grew louder, faster, until she realized it wasn't coming from the gramophone at all. It was coming from the walls. She backed away as faint shapes began to form in the fog. Glass of the windows, human outlines, pressed against the inside of the panes. Dozens of them. Their hands flat against the glass, faces hidden in the mist. She ran to the nearest window and wiped the condensation away, but when she did, there was nothing outside. Only the swamp, still and silent beneath the red light of the moon. She turned back to the room. The figures were gone. The music had stopped. A soft knock echoed from somewhere upstairs. Once. Twice. 3 times. Elise. The voice was gentle this time, almost pleading. She froze, staring up at the ceiling. The sound had come from the attic. Her eyes darted to the staircase in the hall, the same one she'd fled from hours ago. The attic door was open again, its darkness spreading like ink across the walls. She took a slow breath, trying to steady her thoughts. It's not real, she whispered. It's just memory. But even as she said it, she knew she didn't believe it. The house had stopped pretending. As Elise moved toward the stairs, she noticed something strange: the portraits on the walls had changed. The Devereux family, once stoic and proud, now looked afraid. Their eyes no longer followed her, they seemed to look beyond her, toward something else. Something closer. Halfway up the stairs, she heard the whisper again, faint, childlike this time. "Don't open it, Elise." Her hand froze on the banister. The voice had come from directly behind her. She turned, heart pounding, no one there. Just her reflection faintly shimmering in the glass of an old picture frame. But her reflection didn't move the same way she did. It tilted its head. Slowly. Elise stepped back, trembling. "You're not real," she whispered again. The reflection smiled faintly, the same smile she had seen in the attic. Then the sound returned, a single creak from above. The attic door. Open wider now. Waiting. Elise stood there, halfway between fear and fascination, the key still cold in her pocket. The blood moon light poured down the stairwell, painting everything in deep crimson. And for the first time, she felt the house looking back. Not at her. Through her. Whatever was trapped here wanted to remember itself again. And Elise, despite every instinct, was beginning to understand why no one ever truly left the Devereux mansion. Elise stood motionless at the bottom of the staircase, her pulse pounding so loudly she could hear it in her ears. The entire mansion seemed to tilt ever so slightly toward the attic, as if the house itself were urging her upward. Dust hung in the air like smoke, glowing faintly red under the blood moon's light that seeped through cracked windowpanes. Every instinct screamed leave. But something stronger, something curious, desperate, kept her there. She lifted her flashlight again, though its beam was weak and trembling. The wood beneath her boots groaned as she ascended the stairs, step by slow step. Every sound echoed too long, fading only when the next footfall came. By the time she reached the landing, the whispering had returned. Not words this time. Just breaths. Inhale. Exhale. Dozens of them, overlapping, as though she'd walked into a crowded room where everyone was afraid to speak. The attic door waited ahead, open only a few inches now, but the darkness behind it looked thick enough to swallow light. The faint scent of old smoke drifted down the hallway, mixed with something faintly floral. Jasmine. Caroline's perfume. Elisa's fingers brushed the key in her pocket, the skeleton key that had started it all. It felt warmer now, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. She didn't want to take it out. She didn't want to know what it was responding to. She took another step closer. Her reflection flashed in the old hallway mirror beside her, brief, faint, almost normal. But when she turned her head, she realized the reflection hadn't moved with her. It was still staring straight ahead. Her breath hitched. No. She raised her hand slowly. Her reflection didn't copy the motion. Instead, it began to smile, small at first, then wider, until the grin stretched too far, the corners trembling like torn fabric. Her flashlight flickered, the beam slicing through the dark. For a heartbeat, she saw something else in the mirror, not herself, but someone behind her. She spun around. Nothing. The silence was unbearable now, too dense, too alive. Her own breathing came back to her in delayed echoes. Somewhere in that rhythm, she heard something new, a faint tapping from the other side of the mirror. Tap. 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 As if someone, or something, were inside the glass, waiting to be let out. Her throat tightened. "This isn't real," she whispered. "It's a trick of light. Just my mind." The tapping stopped. Then came a faint whisper, so close it brushed her ear. "Step closer." Elise froze. Every muscle locked. The air thickened, heavy with static. The voice wasn't cruel, it was almost tender, coaxing. Familiar. She took a hesitant step forward. The glass shimmered faintly, as though rippling under water. Her reflection now looked like her again, though paler, eyes darker. "Elise," the reflection whispered. She wanted to run, but curiosity anchored her. "Who are you?" "I'm what you left behind." The reflection pressed its palm to the inside of the glass. Slowly, hesitantly, Elise lifted her own hand to match. Her skin prickled as her fingertips met the mirror's cool surface, then, just for an instant, warmth. Flesh. Her reflection's eyes filled with tears. "I remember the sound of the door closing. I remember her screaming. I remember you." Elise's breath came out in small, uneven gasps. "You're not me," she whispered. The reflection smiled again, a sad, knowing smile. "Aren't I?" Then it moved. Fast. Its hands slammed against the glass. Cracks spread outward like lightning, the sound sharp and jagged in the silence. Elise stumbled backward as the mirror pulsed once, twice, before her reflection stepped forward. The glass didn't shatter. It opened. Elise froze, paralyzed by disbelief as her own face emerged from the mirror, pale, trembling, eyes blackened by the red light. The other Elise tilted her head. "Someone has to stay," she said softly. The hallway lights blinked once, twice, then went out completely. Elise's flashlight rolled from her fingers, clattering on the floor. When it stopped, its weak beam caught only the mirror, now empty. Her own reflection was gone. Her hands shook violently. "No, no, no." She turned to run, but the house groaned, a deep, resonant sound that seemed to come from beneath the floorboards. The walls pulsed again, the wallpaper shifting like skin. And from every corner came the soft murmur of the same lullaby she had heard since she arrived. She clutched her head. "Stop it." The whispering grew louder. "Remember, remember, remember." Elise collapsed to her knees, her vision blurring. She saw flashes, faces she didn't know, voices calling her name in accents from another century. The Devereaux children. The nurse. The priest. Caroline. They were all still here. And she understood then, the mirrors weren't showing reflections. They were showing remnants. Fragments of everyone the house had ever claimed, trapped between memory and flesh. The air grew still again. The whispers stopped. Elise lifted her head. The hallway mirror stood silent and whole once more. Her reflection had returned. Only now, it was smiling again. And behind that smile, something else blinked. The light flickered, and Elise's reflection reached out. From the inside. The house had gone silent. Not the ordinary kind of quiet, but a suffocating stillness that pressed against Elise's skin like cold hands. She sat in the middle of the hallway, trembling, her flashlight long dead, her phone cracked and useless. The mirror before her was whole again, her reflection seemingly harmless, yet she didn't dare move. Outside, the storm had returned. Lightning flashed through the windows, lighting the walls with crooked veins of white light. The thunder came seconds later, deep and slow, as though the sky itself were mourning. Elise pushed herself to her feet. Her legs felt hollow, her breath uneven. Every part of her body screamed to run, but she knew she couldn't. Not yet. Not without answers. The whispers had faded, but something deeper lingered. The pull. The same pull that had brought her here. The same pull that had taken Caroline 2 decades ago. At the far end of the corridor stood a door, one she hadn't noticed before. It was smaller than the others, made of darker wood, carved with strange, looping symbols. The key in her pocket felt suddenly heavy. She didn't want to touch it. But her hand reached in anyway. When her fingers closed around the skeleton key, a faint hum vibrated through her bones. She stepped closer to the door, lantern light flickering weakly as she passed. The walls breathed with her, in and out, slow and deliberate. "Caroline," she whispered into the dark. If you're here, please. Show me. For a moment, nothing. Then, faintly, a shadow moved just beyond the door. A woman's outline. Pale hair. Bare feet. Elisa's throat tightened. Caroline. The shadow didn't answer. It simply turned, facing her. And smiled. Her pulse hammered as she slid the key into the lock. The metal was ice cold, biting into her fingers. She hesitated only once, then turned it. Click. The sound echoed down the hall, swallowed by the storm. The door creaked open, releasing a breath of air that smelled of wet earth and age. Elise lifted her lantern higher. The room beyond was circular, its walls lined with mirrors from floor to ceiling. Dozens of them, tall, old, and uneven. Some cracked, some stained, all reflecting fragments of her light. She stepped inside. Her own image stared back at her from every direction, dozens of Elisas, standing motionless, their faces pale, their eyes blackened by shadow. The door closed behind her with a slow, hollow sound. Elise. The voice was faint, all around her now. Dozens of them, whispering in unison. She spun, the lantern shaking in her grasp. Who's there? The reflections didn't answer. They only began to move. One blinked. Another tilted her head. The others followed, movements just slightly off-beat, as if they were learning how to mimic her. The light in the room began to flicker. Each time it dimmed, more reflections changed. Some turned their backs. Some began to smile. Some pressed their hands against the glass as if desperate to escape. Elise stumbled backward. Stop, please. But the whispers only grew louder. You came back. You opened the door. You let us remember. Lightning flashed through a crack in the ceiling, and for one instant, she saw the truth, the faces in the mirrors weren't all hers. Some were Caroline. Some were strangers. Some were far older, dressed in clothing from another century. All trapped. All staring. The key in Elisa's hand began to twist, as though something inside the metal wanted to move. The mirrors rippled like water, the images bending and reshaping. Then, from directly behind her, a voice whispered, soft, warm, familiar. You can free us, Elise. You only have to take my hand. She turned slowly. Caroline stood before her, looking unchanged from the photographs, calm, graceful, eyes glistening like candlelight. Elisa's heart ached. I thought you were gone. Caroline smiled gently. I was. Until you opened the door. Elise stepped closer, tears stinging her eyes. What is this place? The in-between, Caroline said softly. Where the house keeps what it wants to remember. Elise hesitated. And if I stay? Caroline's smile wavered. Then you'll never have to forget. The mirrors trembled. The whispers rose in a single, terrible harmony, voices of the lost, crying out as one. Elise dropped the lantern, glass shattering across the floor. Darkness surged in, swallowing the light. Caroline's hand reached out, glowing faintly. Take it, she whispered. You can save them. Elise reached forward, and stopped. She looked around at the endless faces, at the trapped, pleading eyes. No, she said quietly. Not like this. Caroline's expression fell. The voices screamed, not in anger, but sorrow. The mirrors began to crack, one by one, splintering in every direction. Light spilled from the fractures like liquid gold, flooding the room. Elise shielded her face as the air thundered around her. And then, silence. When she opened her eyes, she was standing in the main hall again. The storm had passed. The air was still. Morning light seeped through the broken shutters. The skeleton key lay on the floor before her, blackened, melted, useless. Elise picked it up carefully, turning it over in her hand. Behind her, the mirror at the end of the hall stood untouched. Her reflection watched quietly. It smiled. But Elise didn't. She placed the key on the nearest table and walked toward the front door. Her footsteps echoed once, twice, and then faded as the door closed softly behind her. The plantation was empty again. Almost. Because in the silence, beneath the hum of cicadas and the distant roll of thunder, a faint whisper drifted through the halls. Remember. And in the hallway mirror, Elisa's reflection turned, long after she was gone.